on sharing this data with you. I've been waiting for this day when I would see the trends start to really converge, and this word convergence is going to be very important, as you'll see. And I've branded this a convergence of consciousness. If you don't know ShiftCo, we do a lot of free training events. They're both for our members, but also for the broader conscious entrepreneur community. You're welcome to attend any of them. We want to share our good work and the work of our master teachers with conscious entrepreneurs to help you grow. And that's what we do. So these are two events that are coming up in March. We usually have 2 to 3 events every month. Master teacher and coach for ShiftCo, Carla Reeves, she's amazing. She's got a program called Mind Your Time. It's really on time management, but it's really about investing your time, and it's about the mindset of time. And then I'm redoing an event that I did last year with some new data called 5 Ways to Grow in a Recession. So feel free to check either of those out. For those of you I don't know, my name is Terri Maxwell, and I like to say that I invest in purpose. I have a portfolio of companies that are all purpose-based and serve conscious businesses. ShiftCo is business number 5, and ShiftCo is a conscious business growth platform. So we help conscious entrepreneurs go from 0 all the way up to 10 million. And we've got a diagnostic prescriptive methodology that does that. I love doing it. I wake up every day thinking about how to grow conscious businesses. I go to sleep at night thinking about how to grow conscious businesses. So that's me. But this topic, as I mentioned, I've been following these trends for 10, 15 years as they've started to show up. But what I wasn't seeing is convergence until the last 3 months or so. So let me put that into context. When I was in corporate America, and I was part of an educational software company, I saw these trends starting to converge. So the web was really taking off. Students were being trained at home as well as at school. So I thought that was interesting. That was when charter schools were just coming on the horizon. And third is technology was becoming more commonplace and more available. And so I was meeting with the president of our company and talking through these trends, and he says, "Are they converging?" And I said, "What does converging mean?" And he said, "You know that you've got something when trends converge, when one growth in one impacts a growth in another." And he said, "We only invest when we see converging trends." And I was like, "Oh, okay." Well, anyway, I followed his advice, and I've been tracking trends. I'm kind of a geek that way, so business research and is my jam. I'll give you an example. Back in 2010, I was studying some trends, and I saw 3 trends converge. I literally saw this happen: cloud computing, social media, makes perfect sense, but mobile. And what would happen is, as mobile penetration, you can see that's an iPhone 1.0. It was the first iPhone that was released. When the more that mobile would grow, the faster cloud computing and social media would grow. The more social media grew, the faster mobile grows. So that's convergence. And I started realizing that these 3 disparate trends, which didn't have anything to do with work, were going to affect work. And what I saw was that work would be fractionalized, careers would be virtualized, and talent will be globalized. And I partnered with a client of mine who's like a brother, and we wrote the book, The New World of Work, in 2012. Okay, so we know what's happened since then, right, to the world of work. And in that first edition, we talked about how we anticipated that 50 or more % of the workforce would be freelance, which today it is. We also predicted that 60 to 70% of the workforce would be virtual. Today it is. And we also predicted that talent, you're trying to find resources, would not be confined to a 30-mile radius. It would actually be global. So ironically, a publisher came to us and asked us to re-release that book because we were so on target with those predictions. So the second edition of this book just literally came out. And basically we updated, what were we right on? What were we not right on? And what is the next set of trends going to unveil? Well, it was in the research for the second edition of this book that I'm like, oh my God, these conscious indicators are actually converging right now. I hadn't seen it because they're reported on so separately that I hadn't seen it. And I was like, oh, wow, this is exciting. So that's what I'm going to share with you today. Now I'm going to go through the 5 trends, and I'm going to go through examples of what's happening right now. When you hear that, it's going to feel disparate. So it's going to feel like, I don't understand how they connect, but I want you to stay with me because I'm going to show you how it connects. And I'm going to give you 3 things that you can do to capitalize on the convergence of these trends. So what are the trends that are converging now? I call this the convergence of consciousness. It's very exciting. Now I could add about 3 more trends in personal development space. I could, and I'm studying something new on bioelectricity. For those of you that have taken the Prosperity Challenge, it's based on some of the principles of bioelectricity and what they're now calling the electrome, which is the electrical current running through our body and how you can use that. But I didn't include those for here because I wanted to stay focused on a few. But there's more in the other realm that I could add to this, which, as you see in a second, is going to become pretty significant. But I want to frame this up because Fast Company recently said in 2023, the only certainty for businesses will be change and purpose. That's what they said. I can think that's pretty true. So what are the trends? I believe that they are going to reshape the global landscape. And again, I'm not even counting things like bioelectricity and stuff like that. And there's a couple of others, but I'm not even counting them. So the first one is purposeful startups. Second is stakeholder capitalism. Third is conscious consumer spending. Some of you might have been here when Heath Shackelford presented his 10 years of research on conscious consumer spending. 4 is conscious leaders in what they're doing with their career. And then number 5 is conscious investing. So let's take a look at these. Let's start with purposeful startups. This was fascinating. This shift happened about 2 years ago. The proportion of those people this is from Global Entrepreneurship Monitor, the number of businesses that were started for social reasons tipped in 31 of 47 economies. So that means that the majority of people starting businesses in 31 of 47 economies did so for the reason of social impact. Well, for those of us in this space, we're like, well, what other reason could it be? Of course, I want to make a difference. Prior to that, the primary reason that people started a business was to make a lot of money. But the tipping point happened about 2 years ago. And now it's actually starting to show up in multiple economies. As you're going to see, there's a reason why it's starting to show up in multiple economies globally. In developed countries, 7 out of 10 startups, 7 out of 10, it's the highest it's ever been, consider social impact as part of their strategy, 70%. Ironically, they also noted that there was a high proportion of entrepreneurs who want to make a difference in their world. That's their primary motive. 7 economies had 7 out of 10 agree. And in US and Canada, it was only 5 out of 10. So for those of you that are part of ShiftCo, I've been talking about our global expansion. There's a reason why is other countries, particularly Europe, is aggressively starting to move towards conscious business and conscious economies. So that's fascinating. So that's number 1. More businesses are being started to do good, period. So that's trend number 1. And remember, I'm going to present them separately, and then I'm going to show you how they converge. It's the convergence that actually creates the hockey stick. It creates the opportunity. So let's look at number 2, stakeholder capitalism. On the B Lab side, this is as of last year. I'm sure there's more now. There are over 6,300 certified B Corps. Conscious capitalism. As many of you know, we've recently partnered with both Conscious Capitalism and B Lab to run a series of conscious business growth summits around, first in the US, then in Canada, and then in Europe. There's a reason why. It's because stakeholder capitalism, which is, I believe, one of the most important pieces of the way businesses will be set up. Stakeholder capitalism means that I'm not beholden to shareholders. I am building this business for a purpose, and my purpose is to serve stakeholders. For example, Shifco is a public benefit corporation going through the certification to be a certified B Corp. What that means is we look at our members' success rather than shareholder returns. And if we don't feel like our members are getting success, we'll pull back on, we've done this twice, pull back on our growth and figure out what programs we need to add to ensure our members double and triple their revenue, which is what our mantra is. We want every member to double and triple their revenue while they're working with us. Well, stakeholder capitalism allows us to do that because my shareholders know that I am beholden legally by our corporate structure as a public benefit corporation. I'm beholden to take care of those customers. So that's why stakeholder capitalism matters so much, is having a certified and a public benefit structure means that I can live those conscious capitalism values. It brings teeth to them. American Sustainability Business Network say they now represent over 250,000 businesses across their network. So all three of those are growing at the same rate as we're starting to see the purposeful startups expand. That's impactful, but there's more. Good Must Grow. For those of you that were here, Heath has been tracking what he calls the Consumer Spending Index, Conscious Consumer Spending Index. And he saw a big jump of it 2020 to 21. It went up to 51, which is the percentage of buyers that are choosing, making conscious choices, which I'm going to talk a little bit more about in a minute. It did dip in 2022 because of inflation, but once inflation stabilizes and the economy kind of works through some of its kinks, which is going to mean a recession here soon, once that starts to happen and it stabilizes, both Heath and I believe it's going to be back above 50. And then these are just the important, this was really impactful, the importance and intentions of buyers. How important is it to buy from socially responsible companies? Look at 2022, look at that number, that is 67. I actually bought goods and services from a socially responsible, dipped just a little bit at 57. And I plan to spend more with socially responsible companies, still very high. That number didn't come down. So that's huge. And then this piece, I'm going to circle back to several times because I call this particular data point that he spoke about where the rubber meets the road is when you ask consumers, would you choose A over B, B over C, C over D? What they said is 83% said, you've got to meet my needs as a consumer. You've got to provide value. Number two was you've got to be trustworthy. You have to be able to trust you. Now that is really important to how these 5 trends are going to impact you. So don't forget that, because I'm going to circle back to that. 82% is how well does the company treat its customers, employees, and community? Social media has made that because social media and online reviews give you a degree of transparency. Protecting my health and safety. And then number 5 is a company's purpose and mission. That is one of the highest that number has been in spite of the economy. So that's conscious consumer spending. So why are there more purposeful startups? Because conscious consumer spending is tilting. Why are more companies choosing stakeholder capitalism as a better business model? Because there's more purposeful startups and because consumers are making different decisions. It all starts to fit. But there's more. I believe the accelerant in this convergence is that conscious leaders are starting to take control of companies, Gen X's, millennials, regardless of where you fall on the generation spectrum. And Gen X in particular, followed by millennials, are now starting to move into VP roles and C-suite roles, and they are making very different decisions than their predecessors did. They're making conscious decisions. I'm going to talk specifically about that. This is from Great Place to Work. Millennials are now the largest working population. They will be 75% of the global workforce in 5 years. Now, there's lots of debate about the pros and cons of millennials, and I'm not going to debate that because I call them the 9/11 generation, that they were born when we were going through September 11th. So I believe they have a different perspective because of that. But they make different buying decisions. They're different leaders. Virtual work is like, duh, of course, everybody would do that. Stakeholder capitalism, well, of course, there's no other way to do business. They're not beholden to those old ways of doing business. So as they move into those leadership ranks, they are prioritizing work-life balance. You've heard the debate over the 4-day work week. That's being driven by Gen X and millennials. And by the way, I am an advocate of the 4-day work week. When we have tested it in our own company over the last 10 years, we get better productivity when we're doing a 4-day work week. Well, they're driving that. Our parents' generation, baby boomers and the greatest generation, it was like, work for the man, work as long as you can, work as hard as you can, get the gold watch, retire. Millennials are saying life's too short to do that. Why are they saying that? Because they're the 9/11 generation, and the things that they've gone through in their short life, they view the world very differently. So they are now the largest working population, and they will be 75% of the workforce, but they are also moving into leadership and management roles. So don't forget that. Their leadership values include a corporate ability to embrace cultural diversity and a focus on making a difference. Like, that's not a nice to have with them. That is absolutely the way that it needs to be. And this is fascinating. They will also leave companies. Great Place to Work found if these 3 practices did not exist, there was not a clear corporate purpose, i.e. stakeholder capitalism. There was not a one team, one goal, we're all on the same page, and fair treatment for all. They will leave companies. And ironically, what they're open to, this is from Startup Nation, is 1 in 3 millennials reported having a business on the side or a side hustle. 1 in 5 are saying it's already their main source of income. So they're leaving corporate America. The largest group of workers are leaving corporate America because they can't find a value system that matches their own, and they are not afraid to start businesses, which is why these other circles are growing. 47% believe that everyone has the means. Now think about this. When I started my business, my first business, which was 2002, so that was 20 years ago, I was scared to death. I thought I was going to fail. For 3 years, I thought I was going to fail. 47% of millennials believe that everyone has the means to start their own business. 84% revealed they're more satisfied as an entrepreneur than when they work for someone else. So you can see now how these are starting to come together, but I'm going to tighten it up here in a minute. And then the last one, which is the one that was the kicker when we were working on New World of Work, the second edition that just came out, what I was seeing is the purposeful startups, stakeholder capitalism, conscious leaders. I was seeing that in spades when we were doing the research for the New World of Work. But the kicker, the accelerant here, is those conscious leaders. Now, in addition to changing companies, think about this, not only are they either starting companies that are going to be purposeful, or they are changing companies as they move into the management ranks. In addition to that, they are investing differently, very differently. So they're looking at, who am I investing in? I'm not just going to put my money in this mutual fund. Socially responsible investing as a strategy to inspire both social change and financial returns is at an all-time high. 2020, said that 80% of the studies found that sustainable business practices had a positive influence on investment performance. Let me say that in English. The more a company adhered to sustainable practices, the better they did from providing an ROI for investors. Why is that? Because they have to be beholden to stakeholders as well as shareholders. Several studies showed that socially responsible investing mutual funds not only matched traditional mutual funds, but actually outperformed them. Now, here's the accelerant. So I told you there were a couple of accelerants. One are these younger, more conscious leaders starting new businesses and entering the management ranks. Number two is a record 12.2 billion went into funds where ESG governance was in place, which is basically socially responsible investing. Experts are now predicting it's going to be 50 trillion in the next 20 years. So talk about throwing gas on the fire. That's a lot of gas. So now let's kind of back away. So I took you into the details and all of a sudden I started to go, whoa, we're getting ready to hit a tipping point where this convergence, where these trends are now driving each other. That's the key. If we want a better world, I believe that these trends will now start driving each other. So the common ingredients that they have is purpose and trust. So purpose meaning what's a company's mission? Why are they here? Why are they in business? What's their value? So when I say purpose, I mean the broadest sense of purpose, and trustworthiness, okay? But now let's kind of look at how I believe these things are going to converge and why I think we're at a beautiful tipping point that I've been waiting for the 14 years that I've been a conscious entrepreneur. I believe we're on the cusp of this tipping point. So one of the things my grandfather taught me, he was my first entrepreneurial mentor, is he said, follow the money. The money will basically tell you where the opportunities are. And when I really follow the money and I look and see what's happening, the first thing that I see is consumer buying behavior is moving to zero waste, single use, sustainable, and values based. No doubt about it. You can see it in Heath's research. You can see it, people are making it difficult. And I was really stressing when I read some of Heath's research, and I thought, I don't want this to set us back because I know this is one of the drivers, until I did some research on Facebook. And what I found on Facebook is people whose pocketbooks have been compressed are not changing and buying single-use products. They're getting smarter and they're collaborating differently. There's now a whole group of sites on Facebook where you can give away anything you don't need, and they're in community. So they're community-based. And you basically go in and say, hey, I just moved to Dallas. I don't have any furniture. Can anybody help me out? Somebody in that group says, yeah, I've got a chair and a table. I'll set it out and you can come get it. So you don't have to buy the furniture. So the beautiful thing about, I believe, this economic pressure that we're in is it's causing people to be smarter and to collaborate better, because we're starting to see people repurpose things they never would have repurposed. Even when I go clothes shopping today, I'm like, okay, how long is this going to last? Where is it made? I don't go like I used to go every year, where 3 times a year I'd go buy a bunch of new wardrobe and my closet would get full and I'd get rid of stuff. Not doing that anymore. So we're seeing, even in this economic pressure cooker that we're in right now, this idea of zero waste, single use, sustainable, and values based is not going away. It's just that people aren't buying as much, and they're not buying as much because they are finding more creative ways to get what they need than just buying it, which I think is a good thing. I think it's going to be difficult as we go through the recession, but I think it's a good thing. So that's number one. And I believe this is going to be a huge driver. People are getting smarter, and they're not saying, well, I don't have the money, so instead of buying product A, I'm going to buy product B and go back to, packaging that's hurting the environment. They're not saying that. They're saying, you know what? I can't afford this other thing over here, so I'm going to do this thing over there. And I think that's good, because I don't think their values are changing. I think they just don't have the income that they used to have. So that's number one. Number two is conscious companies and leaders. So we have more conscious companies, conscious capitalism and B Lab certifications are basically showing that. But also those millennial leaders are going into the companies and they are also starting new companies. And I believe that is one of the accelerants on top of this consumer buying behavior that's changing. And then the last kicker is this conscious investing. So follow the money. More funds have been set up to invest in conscious companies in the last 2 years than the 10 years prior to that. So I help several of my clients in the Ignite on Purpose business. I help them raise funds. One of my favorite products, a product called Izzy Beauty. It's a zero waste makeup and skincare line. It's my favorite product in the whole world. I'm an investor. I'm helping raise funds for it. And we are finding that investors want to talk to us because they have funds for products that are zero waste, single use, and sustainable. So that conscious investing basically followed the money. So that conscious investing is going to make more products available. Think about this. I'll try to draw this on the screen. That conscious investing is going to make more products available here at a lower price. On top of that, you've got conscious leaders and conscious companies basically saying, we want to do business differently and we want to invest our profits differently. What we have is a set of converging trends that is game-changing and revolutionary. Woo! Blows my mind. So I'm not going to take questions just yet because I want to, we are recording this. I want to go through 3 things that you can do right away to shift what you're doing to take advantage of this. We are at a tipping point and the tip has started. And I believe the accelerants are there. And even if the economy goes into a full-on recession, which I do believe is going to happen in 2023, I still believe this tipping point is going to go, and I think it's going to go fast and furiously, and I don't think we're looking back, and I think this is the path to a better world. So what does it mean for us? What do we do? This is great, Terri. It's exciting, but here I am in my own little slice of the world, and I'm trying to grow my business. What can I do? What actions can I take? What can I shift? So I think there's 3 things as I prepared for this session today that I'm doing that I would encourage you to do. The first shift is choose your mindset and choose it very carefully. And I mean very carefully. Some of you guys have heard the story about my grandfather, and you get what you focus on. I'm not going to bore you with that, but I'll boil it down to this. My grandfather taught me using a sports analogy. I was an athlete and I was playing sports, and I had this very bad situation happen to me where I messed up really bad and I was blaming everybody. And my grandfather pulled me aside and said, Terri, you get what you focus on. And he used this analogy where the first half of the game, I was focused on my goal, the scoring. The second half of the game, I was focused on the obstacle, the things that weren't going well. And he said, basically, I was trying to blame everybody else and I fell into victim mindset. And he said, no. When things are not going the way that you want, you don't focus on the obstacle. You focus on what it is you want to create. So the reason why I put this as number 1 thing that I would do is it is so easy to get discouraged right now. It is so easy to look at what's not working. It is so easy to feel the pressure of the economy. It is so easy because we struggle in our business. It's hard to build a business. It's hard. I've done it multiple times and it's still hard. And it's so easy to get distracted by what's not working. So I want to challenge you. I have a practice that I do every single day. And in the beginning of the day, I basically write down 3 things that are working. So at the beginning of the day, I write down what are 3 things that are working right now. At the end of the day, I write down 1 thing that I was grateful for. If you can just train your mind to choose a more positive mindset, I believe you will get where you want to go faster. And there's research now that backs this up. I'm a huge fan of positive intelligence that basically talks about the 2 sides of the brain. And what they found is the neurons in the brain basically are electric and magnetic. And so any negative thought that I think attracts another negative thought. Any positive thought that I think attracts more positive thoughts. And those neural pathways in the brain actually begin to connect. And if we're stuck in victim mindset, that's not working, this isn't working for me, blah, 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 blah. If we're stuck in that or blaming this or blaming that, what's happening is we're actually strengthening the negative pathways and negative neural pathways in our brain. Well, the alternative is true. You can strengthen the positives. So that practice that I started of starting every day, writing down 3 things that are working and ending every day with what I was grateful for has been a game changer for me, because I can tell it is much easier for my brain to look for the opportunities rather than the obstacle. So think back to that basketball analogy. I've trained my brain to always focus on the goal and where I'm going, even when it's hard, even when something is standing in my way, even when something's not working. I've trained my brain to take my eye off of what's not working and put it on to what is. So that's number one. And I believe you have to train your brain like an athlete to make that work, to be part of maximizing this convergence. Number 2, in addition to choosing your mindset, really rethink, who do you want to serve? And I mean, really rethink this. If you haven't done this, I know if you're in Shifco, we encourage you to do this a lot, but if you haven't done this, really ought to do it. And there's a couple of ways that we recommend. I'm not a big fan of writing down, your 50 attributes of your avatar, because I think that's too complicated. So we have a really simple process that I'm going to recommend for this, to sort this out. Just start with a couple of questions. Who do I want to serve? Like, who wakes me up and I get excited? Like for me, conscious entrepreneurs, man, that's all I think about is how can I help you grow? How can I help you grow? How can I help you grow? So who do I want to serve, and will I enjoy working with them? So start with those questions, kind of put some ideas together there. And then we use this little tool, and we start with the widest target. So this is Shifco's. Who do I want to serve in Shifco? I'm very clear. 1, you have to be a founder. I don't like working with the number 2 in the company. I don't like working with an investment group because I think the entrepreneur is the one that's got the skin in the game. So founders, number 1. Secondly, they have to be driven by impact and purpose, not hope to, wish to, want to, driven by impact and purpose. That they have to have a compelling reason for their business to matter. If it's just to pay the bills, that's not somebody I enjoy serving. And then third, and this is really important, you have to want to grow. And if your business isn't growing, that almost always means you might not be willing to do the hard stuff to master entrepreneurship. And I really do believe entrepreneurship, you have to have a commitment to mastering. It's like the bucking bronco. It's not easy. It's going to be hard. So I know for me, the folks that I want to serve, they have those 3 attributes. Sure, they have 50 others, but these are the 3 that I get excited about, that wake me up every day. So that's an example. You'll see why in a minute that matters, because when you're stuck in a situation where you have to take work to pay the bills, and you're not crystal clear on who you're on this earth to serve, what happens is you get off track. Your mission gets off track. Your purpose gets off track. You end up doing things to pay the bills rather than actually doing what really fills you up. And before you know it, your business is no longer fulfilling. So that's shift number 2. Shift number 3 goes with that, and that is focus on value and purpose. This is the last piece of, big ahas. When right before we started Shifco, I was analyzing and trying to articulate the difference between a conscious entrepreneur and a regular entrepreneur. And what I found is that conscious entrepreneurs obsessively focus on value. Like, they're not here to just do stuff. They want to know their clients are satisfied. They want to know their clients are happy. They want to work with clients that love working with them. So this obsessive focus on value. And I began to see these 3 patterns. So an entrepreneur, when they build a product, they're like, hey, I've got this new pen. Will somebody buy it? A conscious entrepreneur says, there's tons of pens in the world. What I want is a pen that doesn't run out of ink quickly. because that's a problem for my target market. So a conscious entrepreneur knows the target market, and they are only building products that solve a problem. So one, that idea of knowing who you want to serve, but also really knowing the problem you solve and being crystal clear about your product. Does your product solve that problem? I'll put that into context. The reason why we measure every single member that is in ShiftCo, we know whether or not they have made it to the next business phase, and or if we think their business has doubled in size. If they haven't, right now 81% have, 19% have not. So what we are obsessively focused on the 19%. We are constantly looking at that 19% and say, what can we do differently? What can we do differently? But 81% have doubled or gotten into the next business phase. Yay us. I'm not sitting here patting our back, right? What I'm saying is, why not the 19%? What do we have to do differently? They're still members. Why aren't they there? That's an example of conscious entrepreneur. So what does that mean for you? Well, what it means for you is, what is the problem that your product or service solves? And how do you know whether or not it's working? Because that's the difference, that obsessive focus on value. How do you know? Don't be afraid to look at that. The first time I presented to our board of directors, which was about a year and a half ago, this tracking mechanism, I was scared to death. At the time, it was 44%. This was about 14 months ago. I was scared to death to present it to our board of directors, scared, panicked. I said, oh, we're only up 44%. And then we sat down and we developed a strategy with our management team and board to say, okay, if it's at 44%, how do we get it to 50? If it's at 50, how do we get it to 60? That's what that looks like. So don't be afraid to look at what's not working in your business. Don't be afraid to look at the clients that aren't completely happy. Go right into that and figure out what you got to do differently. That's what a conscious entrepreneur does, obsessively focus on value. Pricing. So an entrepreneur says, what will someone pay for me for this beautiful pen? Conscious entrepreneur says, how much is this beautiful pen worth? How much is this beautiful pen worth? And they look at, based on the value, how much is this pen worth? Okay, so that's number two. If you ever need help with pricing strategies, we've got a great lesson I can point you to on value-based pricing. Last is success. Is entrepreneur says, how much money can I make? Conscious entrepreneur says, can I make a difference? Now, if you think about these components that we just talked about, and you go back, choose your mindset, and you got to choose it every single day. You got to wake up every time before you go to bed. You got to choose that mindset again. Secondly, really getting crystal clear on who you serve. Use that simple tool that I just shared with you. Third is focus on purpose and value. Obsessively focus on that. And now you look at these trends that are converging. More purposeful startups are starting than ever before. More entrepreneurs are saying, I'm starting a business to make a difference. More of them are choosing stakeholder capitalism and B Corporation certification models to build those businesses because they put teeth into being a purposeful startup. Conscious consumers are not only making choices for what they're going to spend money on, but when they don't have the money, they are getting creative. Remember those Facebook groups I told you? It's called Pay Nothing. Look it up in your community. Pay Nothing. What you are going to see is there are people in those groups where they are matching themselves. I need my glasses broke. I need a new pair of glasses. Somebody jumps in and says, I've got these. Somebody else says, you know, we had a windstorm and it broke our window. Does anybody have an extra window of this size? Pay nothing. Look at the Facebook groups around this pay nothing movement. That's an example of conscious consumers getting smarter, where they're saying, okay, I don't have the money to buy all of the products what I want. So I'm not going to waste my money over here on single-use products that are, you know, hugely wasteful. I'm going to get creative and I'm going to find other ways to get what I need over here so that I can spend the money on the things that I value. Think about that, guys. And I'm serious, this pay nothing movement is huge. Look it up on Facebook and it will blow your mind how creative consumers are getting because they're making conscious choices, conscious spending choices. Fourth, conscious leaders starting businesses, not only entering the workforce, but they're now in the management ranks. They're going to be at the senior management ranks. By 2025, the vast majority of leaders are going to be Gen X or millennial. Inside of most companies, they are making different decisions. Last but not least, conscious investing is going to be a multi-trillion-dollar industry where the vast majority of investment dollars are going to go to conscious companies. So there you have it. I'm going to take questions in a minute. You're welcome to join any of our events anytime. We consider ourselves a service to all conscious entrepreneurs, and we consider ourselves a conscious business growth platform for the members who choose to partner with us. And so I'm going to end this recording for those of you that are listening in, and appreciate your time. And then we'll take a few questions.